Welcome back to the AR-15 barrel series. Today, we'll be looking at a 16-inch chrome-lined HBAR from Criterion that was generously loaned to the channel by a subscriber. This will be a part 1 on the Criterion HBAR because the original barrel got replaced, which we'll get into a little bit later. Anyway, in this video, we'll go over the specs, do an inspection, and then head to the range to see what I can do with this barrel. Moving on to the specs, starting with the normal stuff, the barrel is 16 inches, has a 223 wild chamber, 1-8 twist, 6-groove button rifling. It's made from 4150 chromoly vanadium steel with half by 28 threads, a mid-length gas system, and a phosphate-coated exterior with a chrome-lined bore. Criterion also boasts a few other unique features about this barrel. They advertise that the rifling has been honed and hand-lapped for bore uniformity to aid in cleaning and improve accuracy. Also, Criterion finely polishes the chamber for reliable extraction and feeding. Moving on to the inspection, the largest pin gauge that the gas port accepted was 75 thousandths, which is around the typical size for a 16-inch mid-length barrel compared to the other ones that I've measured so far. The relative weight of this barrel, or the pounds per inch of barrel length, is on the heavier side of the spectrum, which shouldn't be too surprising. Moving on to the barrel extension, the diameter is a bit smaller than average compared to the other barrels that I've measured so far, which will make installation easier, but may result in a looser fit with the upper receiver. Gas block journal diameter is also smaller than average, which may make it a bit more difficult to get a good gas seal with the gas block. Next up is some gauging. The owner of the barrel said he put about 1,000 rounds through it, so we'll see how it's holding up so far. And it's less than a 1 on this gauge. Here is a 223 wild chamber dimensions gauge. This makes sure that the chamber and throat are at least at minimum size. And the barrel passes. Next up, we'll check headspace, starting with a 223 minimum headspace gauge and a stripped bolt from Psionics. And the bolt locks, so that's a pass. Here is a 223 no-go gauge, and the bolt does not lock in place, which is good, so this is also a pass, and means that the barrel is on the tighter side for headspace. Alright, next up we're going to use my test-long Borescope to take a look inside and see what condition the barrel is in. And a reminder that the owner of the barrel put about 1,000 rounds through it before sending it in. The chamber looks to be in fine condition, chrome looks to be in good shape, and I don't see anything to worry about here. Here's a quick spin around the neck of the chamber, and again, everything looks fine to me. I don't see any concerns here either. Moving on to the throat, you can see that there's quite a bit more going on here. Again, this barrel has about 1,000 rounds through it, but you can obviously see some wear on the chrome, and some cracking, and some other spots where it looks like the chrome has flaked away. There's also some copper packed into some of the cracks. You can see the copper looking color in there. Anyway, this is one of the reasons why I ended up contacting Criterion about this barrel, and they ended up replacing it. But here's a comparison of the HBAR with 1,000 rounds through it, and the replacement barrel that Criterion sent that had less than 100 rounds through it at this point. Obviously a pretty stark comparison, but anyway, you can see that the machining on both of the throats looks really good. The start of the rifling is very consistent, and the edges of the rifling on the lead look really clean. A lot of AR barrels usually have a bit of roughness there, but these look really good. And for some bonus content, here's a look at my old Criterion Core barrel that has about 15,000 rounds through it. Obviously, barrels are wear items, and no barrel is going to last forever, but this barrel served me well for when I was using it. I put out a video on this barrel a while back, and I will be releasing an updated video on this barrel at some point in the future, but it'll still be a little while. Anyway, getting back to it. Here's a look at the rifling in the Criterion HBAR that has 1,000 rounds through it. The rifling looks very clean and appears to be in good shape. Here's the gas port. Again, obviously, you can see a bit of wear here, which isn't too surprising. And last, here's a look at the crown. And things look pretty good up here. There are a few really small spots that have a slight roughness to them, but overall, the crown looks really good. Definitely better than average. And with that, we will go over the shooting setup and then head to the range. The barrel was fit into a Colt upper receiver with an Expo Arms 15-inch handguard and a Psionics bolt carrier group. When assembling the upper, the threads were greased and the barrel nut was torqued to the manufacturer's specification. To increase rifle stability during shooting, the handguard was fitted with a 3-inch front bag rider and stock was supported by rear bag. An A5 buffer system was used with an A5-2 buffer and Sprint & Co. green spring. No muzzle device was used to prevent possible interference. The trigger is a Geisley Super Dynamic Enhanced model. The bore was fouled with a few rounds before shooting the first group. Scope is a D&T Optics The One 7-35x56 with a 34mm main tube and Japanese XED glass. The D&T optic is mounted in a Reptilia mount. that was supplied by Danger Space LLC. The mounting clamps were torqued to 45 inch-pounds and rings to 15 inch-pounds. Parallax was set appropriately. A Garmin Zero C1 Pro chronograph was used to collect velocity data. A Mantis X10 Elite was mounted to the front of the handguard to keep track of rifle stability and detect any possible shooter-induced flyers. And the groups were measured using the Ballistic X app. Each group is 30 shots. This simulates a match or practical type scenario where the barrel will get some heat into it and also gives us a decent sample size to work with. Between each group, I used a chamber chiller and leaf blower for cooldown. Distance was 100 yards. Point of aim was a small circle at the bottom of the target. Point of impact was set a few inches higher to preserve the aiming point. Wind was monitored with a ribbon, and each 30-shot group took about 4 minutes to shoot and was edited down to about 25 seconds. Today I'll be shooting 3 groups. First will be with IMI Razor Core 77 grain, then Hornady 73 grain ELD Match, and last will be Winchester M193 55 grain FMJ. Alright, let's do it. Okay, starting things off with the IMI Razor Core. A lot of people think of this as a Mark 262 clone, since it's topped off with a 77 grain Sierra Match King bullet, and it's rated for the same velocity as Black Hill's Mark 262. But anyway, we'll see what I'm able to get out of the Criterion HBAR. The shooting felt fine on my end for this group. Both the Mantis and Garmin chronograph captured data for every shot. Ejection looked pretty consistent, staying pretty close to 3 o'clock for most shots. Recoil felt within normal limits of what do I expect out of a 16-inch barrel with a mid-length glass system, and the wind remained pretty calm for this group. So we will finish things up and then take a closer look. Okay, first we will start off with a velocity comparison. All of these numbers are from the same lot of IMI Razor Core. Of course, there are some differences in the ambient temperature and other environmentals, but there are only so many things that I have control over. Anyway, the 16-inch Criterion HBAR had an average velocity of 2,746 feet per second, which is extremely fast for a 16-inch barrel, considering that this ammo is rated for 2,750 feet per second out of a 20-inch barrel. Also, you can see that the other 16-inch barrels that I've shot this ammo with, that being the HK and Proof barrels, are quite a bit slower than the Criterion. So this was another reason why I contacted Criterion regarding this barrel. And here's a quick look at a few pieces of IMI brass from this group, and there are some pretty clear ejector marks, which can be a sign of overpressure. And I haven't seen these sort of marks to this degree on the other barrels I've shot this ammo from. Anyway, getting back to the velocities, the velocity variation was a bit higher than average for this lot of IMI Razor Core, with a standard deviation of about 23 feet per second and an extreme spread of 102 feet per second. Looking at the individual velocity data, shot 3 was the slowest of the group by a fair amount, at 57 feet per second slower than average. Other than that, nothing else looks too out of place with the velocities. Rifle stability looked fine with an average of 99.6 and the least stable shots at 99.2. And looking at the group, things look to be pretty evenly distributed without any significant outliers. Before going over the group stats, we'll go over my AZ score for those of you who are new here. So AZ stands for A-Zone Equivalence Distance, and it gives you the maximum distance where the calculated group size would still fit into a USPSA A-Zone. The reason why I use this score is because it's easier for me to make sense of the group numbers compared to looking at the raw mean radius numbers. Anyway, moving on to the group numbers, we ended up with a 30-shot group size of 1.954 MOA and a mean radius of 0.584 MOA, which gives us an AZ score of 242 yards. And if you want some more conventional numbers to look at, if we take the 30-shot group and break it down into 3 10-shot groups, the best 10-shot group was 1.4 MOA, and the average 10-shot group was 1.7 MOA. Alright, next up, here is the leaderboard for all the groups that I've shot with the IMI Razor Core 77 grain, and the Criterion HBAR comes in 4th place out of 16 groups with this ammo. The AZ score for the Criterion is only 3 yards behind the Bear Creek Arsenal 20-inch HBAR, and 25 yards behind the Proof Research barrel, which is in 1st place. But the Criterion is the highest ranked chromoline barrel on this leaderboard, just barely edging out the Hodge in 4th place, with the Hodge having an AZ score only 4 yards behind at 238 yards. And with that, we will head to the next group. Alright, here's the group with the Hornady 73 grain ELD Match. I normally have pretty good luck with this load, but things didn't go too well for me with this one and the Criterion. It seemed like it kind of wanted the group, but it ended up with a few wild shots. Anyway, shooting felt fine on my end. Ejection looked pretty good, with most of the brass ejecting around 3 o'clock or so. Recoil felt fine, probably a little bit softer than the IMI Razor Core. The Hornady ELD does seem to be loaded a little bit on the lighter side, so in my experience it does tend to shoot a little bit softer. But of course, that comes at the expense of velocity. And speaking of, the Garmin captured velocities for every shot, and the Mantis also got data on every shot. So we will finish up here and then take a closer look. Alright, starting with the velocity comparison. These velocities are from a few different lots, so that's just something to keep in mind. And also the ambient temperatures are a bit different. But again, the Criterion had an unexpectedly high velocity, with the Criterion having an average velocity of 2,604 feet per second, and one of the HK MR556A4 uppers shot the same lot as the Criterion, but the HK upper shot the Hornady ELD 120 feet per second slower. So, some more interesting happenings on the velocity on this Criterion. Anyway, velocity standard deviation was really good at only 13 feet per second, with an ES of 53 feet per second, and that's the best I've seen from Hornady 73 grain ELDs. Moving on to the individual velocities, again, the SD and ES were pretty solid, so nothing out of the ordinary with the velocities, and rifle stability looked fine with an average of 99.6, and the least stable shot at 99.0. Looking at the group, things look kind of interesting. It kind of seemed like it wanted to group with this ammo, but unfortunately it ended up with a couple shots drifting away from the main cluster. Anyway, moving on to the numbers, 30-shot group size ended up at 2.994 MOA, with a 30-shot mean radius of 0.683 MOA, which gives us an AZ score of 207 yards. And if we break things down into 10-shot groups, the average 10-shot group size was 2.3 MOA. And if we compare this to the other groups I shot with Hornady 73 grain ELD, the Criterion HBAR comes in last place out of the 9 groups I've shot with this ammo. So, not a great outcome for this one. And just to give you a visual, here is the group with the Criterion compared to the top 3 on this leaderboard. So, there's a bit of a difference there. Anyway, let's get to the last group. Alright, last group with the Criterion HBAR will be with Winchester M193. So if you don't already know, you should probably lower your expectations for this group. I don't know if it's something about this lot in particular, but this ammo has given me some interesting results. But unfortunately I bought a bunch of it, so here we are. Anyway, shooting felt fine again on my end. Ejection continued to stay around 3 o'clock, like it did with the other groups. Recoil felt fine. The Garmin captured velocities on all the shots, and the Mantis missed a couple shots. So we will finish up here and then take a closer look. Okay, starting with the velocity comparison. All of this info is from the same lot of Winchester M193. And again, this information was gathered on different days with different temperatures and other slight variations in the variables, but this is what I have. Anyway, again, the Criterion was getting really high velocities. It averaged 3,211 feet per second, and the BCA 20-inch HBAR was only getting 50 feet per second more with an extra 4 inches of barrel length. And the second fastest 16-inch barrel was the Borescope K9, which was 80 feet per second slower than the Criterion. Here's a look at a few pieces of brass from this group, and I can see some marks from the ejector and a bit of cratering on the primers. So again, paired with the increased velocity, I was a bit concerned that I might be getting into some overpressure. Anyway, the velocity variation was slightly better than average, with a standard deviation of 25 feet per second. Looking at the individual velocity data, shot 22 was a bit faster than the rest at 53 feet per second over the average, and shot 3 was the slowest at 64 feet per second below the average. Rifle stability looked fine, with an average of 99.6 and the least stable shots at 99.3. Looking at the group, there are a couple wild ones high and left, and also a few that went a little bit low. 30-shot group size ended up at 4.855 MOA, with a 30-shot mean radius of 1.154 MOA, which gives us an AZ score of 122 yards. And breaking things down into 10-shot groups, things were fairly consistent with 10-shot groups between 3.1 MOA and 3.4 MOA, with an average 10-shot group size of 3.3 MOA. And comparing the Criterion to the others, the Criterion HBAR ends up in the middle of the pack, in 8th place out of 16 groups with Winchester M193. Alright, so here are the overall results. Of course, keep in mind that I am not a perfect shooter, and that all of these groups could probably be at least a little bit better. Also, this is just my experience with one barrel and 3 different types of ammunition, so any number of different things could potentially change the outcome. Anyway, for probably the first time ever, the IMI Razor Core shot a better group than the Hornady ELDs. Usually, the Hornady 73 grain ELDs put up pretty good groups, but this combo just didn't work out for me this time, and the Hornady ended up a pretty fair amount behind the IMI. So, the IMI ended up with an AZ score of 242 yards, and the Hornady ended up a decent amount behind that at 207 yards. And then the Winchester M193 group came in with an AZ score of 122 yards. All of the velocities were really high compared to the other barrels I shot with this ammo, and the brass was showing some signs of pressure. So, as I mentioned at the start of this video, I did reach out to Criterion and they ended up replacing this barrel. So we'll go over the replacement barrel in a follow-up video that I'll be doing a little bit later. And that will do it for now. I'll see you next time. Later.